Hello, my squids. Prize-winning squid here. Welcome to the channel. If this is your first time, welcome to the Calamari Calamity. And if you're returning, welcome back. As you guys can see, we are in a new year, so happy new year to everybody out there. Hope you guys had an awesome holiday season, awesome new year. If you don't celebrate new year or holidays, I hope you just had a great end of whatever the end of last year was into the beginning of this one. As you guys can see, I've been a little absent and the format is still being played with, but one of the reasons is partially what I want to talk about today. So one of the biggest reasons that I've been absent, I haven't done a lot of videos, is because the end of last year, I was finishing up all of my webcomic stuff. So I finally launched my webcomic, Talia. Woo! I have it up on my art by the prizewinningsquid.com website under the comics section. I'm also publishing under the globalcomics.com website, which is a website that is positioning itself to try to be one of the lead websites where you can do and read digital comics from all kinds of creators. You can also read physical comics in their digital format. It's supposed to try to fill in Comixology's space that it kind of obliterated. So we'll see how that pans out. All I know is that this website is super clean, very easy to find things. You can communicate with people, follow people, see updates very easily. I freaking love it. They have an app. So if that is more your style than just going to a normal artist's website to read their comic, go ahead and download that app or go check out that website. I'm publishing over there. I have the first 4 pages up now, and I'm publishing new pages every 2 weeks on Fridays. So I plan to do between 1 to 3 pages every time I do an update. Just depends on what my storytelling ideas are at the time. I have a bunch of pages stockpiled. I'm very far ahead in actually creating the comic, so don't worry about that. That's not an issue. It's just how much do I want to put out at the time, kind of like tease and kind of get the story going. But anyway, beyond that, the thing I wanted to talk about today is art style and how I feel art style is a myth. And I think that goes hand in hand today because I have spent the last 3 to 4 years trying to figure out what an art style is, especially in terms of comic books and creating comic books. So I'm going to do some speed painting of the 4 characters from Talia, the 4 main characters, I should say, from Talia. There's going to be Layra Orta, there's Micah Ido, there is Zolani Abraham, and Atticus Riley. And I'm going to be doing their portraits that I did at the end of last year. You guys can see it's a completely different style than I was doing earlier in the year and middle of the year, where I was doing a lot of gradient mapping and stuff like that. So you guys will kind of see a little bit of that, and I'll talk a little bit about why I think art style is a myth and why I think trying to find or search for an art style should not be something that you're after in terms of just like creating art and figuring out who you want to be as an artist. So let's go ahead and just get into it, and I'll talk about more of that while we watch the speed paint. So, at its core, an art style is simply a collection of techniques you use to create your art. They don't define you. They aren't the end-all or be-all to any one way of doing anything. They simply help you overcome hurdles that might crop up while creating. There are a million videos that purport to help you find your art style or to do these things to figure out your art style, which I think are erroneous at best and honestly capable of stunting the growth potential of a beginning artist at worst. I believe trying to find an art style as if it's the holy grail that will make your art all that it's supposed to be, all that it's supposed to contain, will not only lead to things like art block, but stagnation. You only harm yourself when attempting to adhere to the rigid confines of an art style. When you understand that art styles are myths, that they don't really exist as a singular thing for you to aspire to, then you can break down the walls to truly create whatever you want. Now, while you watch these speed paints, I want you to keep a couple things in mind. Keep in mind all of the things I had to do to figure out how to create Talia, that these speed paints will not show you. They won't show you all of the behind the scenes tests, brushes, projects that won't be finished, half completed color swatches and rendering efforts, the sketches that bore no fruit, the abandoned brushes that I wanted to use on my comic series and illustrative work. They won't show you the decisions I made in assembling certain things and techniques that I used to figure out how to fix issues in areas that I had not seen another artist have in their work. They won't show you how I had to stop thinking about, well, is it going to be more anime-like or more Western comic book-like just to get the panels on the page? They won't show you how I had to stop thinking that only certain fonts or lines or brushes could be used in the creation of my work, because very rigid definitions of art style were allowed to exist in that space. The only way that I could create this was to break away from all of that and use what felt natural to me. I had to stop searching for something specific and start picking a la carte the things that made sense to me for what I like. I had to realize that art style, and especially the perfect art style, is a myth. When I decided to start working on art again, I knew I wanted to create comics. I loved doing it as a kid, all the way through college, and honestly regret ever quitting. Back then, I had Marvel, DC, and Image to look at along manga spilling out of my shelves. My drawings back then were a strong combination of both sets of techniques. I pulled a little from one, a little from the other to combine things to make sense for me, but I also had a habit of thinking, my stuff doesn't look like X, Y, and Z, so I need to try to make it look more like X, Y, and Z. I wish I could go back and tell myself not to do that, and to tell myself that trying to conform to a supposed art style was only going to make me miserable in the end. It was because the things I was seeing from other creators was just a combination of what they enjoyed, not a combination of what I enjoyed. I needed to figure out and piece together those things that made me happiest. When I started to learn to draw again, especially in regards to Talia, it meant that I had to relearn everything from anatomy to color theory. But this time, I also had to learn how to draw digitally because it wasn't something I had done before. That meant that I needed to find all new techniques that I could use with the apps I was using, which were Procreate and Clip Studio Paint. That also meant that I had to look up videos on how to do things as simple as coloring in these apps or transforming a line. And what happens when you look up something on the internet? A slew of options show up. So this was my chance. I'd look through different ones and see which ones felt the most fun to use. It wasn't based off of the way the person was creating. It wasn't how they were putting their stuff together. It was just that one singular technique I was looking at. Some of them, honestly, it was plain cell shaded art. Others, it was oil paints and watercolor in their work. Others still, it was just all black and white ink with hatch marks. Maybe it was the way someone doing oil paints did their shadows, and how someone who was doing cell shading did their highlights that I liked. So I mixed the two. Or the way the person doing black and white ink did their line thickness, and the way someone did noses. And then there was the way someone did eye shapes, but another person rendered theirs. Two completely different genres of work. But I love them both so much that I incorporated elements of what they did into what I like my own eyes to look like. In fact, you can go back over the course of a few years and see in my work how my eyes changed. I once didn't do pupils at all in my eyes because I love the way that you could kind of shape how a character was looking at something with highlights. I do pupils now, but that highlight technique, I still use it. It's just the technique. All of this was to unburden myself from the idea that an art style should be a single self-contained box that must be adhered to. It doesn't, because every single day you can incorporate something new and different into your art. You can completely change your process. You're allowed to do that.
In fact, doing this is one of the other ways for you to get out of art block. Remember, artwork isn't really the finished piece. It's you. It's the act of creation. The finished piece is just that. It's a finished piece, but the actual art is what's in your head with the techniques you know and how to put it all down and make it work. The style is simply you, not some prison where you're only allowed to do the step-by-step method that's contained inside. You're allowed to change and deviate and be different from piece to piece to piece. What you created last month is allowed to be significantly different than what you create a month from now. If this is something you want to do professionally and for a living, you need to know thousands of ways to create something for it to look different. You need to be able to adapt and become a chameleon, knowing how to mimic others and the art they create, while also knowing exactly how to create something that speaks to you from the soul. At the end of the day, what you make, how you make it, and how it makes you feel is all that matters. Once you've divorced yourself from the idea that what you need to do artistically must exist in a narrowly defined lane, then you'll see that the possibilities will open up for you significantly. I mean, honestly, there was a point in time where I didn't think I could do gigantic backgrounds. And now I realize that not only can I do them, but I want to do them. And what brought me to that were techniques that I learned along the way to figure out how to make it not just easier, but cleaner and something that I wanted to see. It wasn't a style, because I didn't change how I do my characters and anything else. It was simply a collection of techniques that helped me figure out how to make it easier to do my backgrounds. How to learn something that I didn't know how to do before. And I suppose that created what would essentially be the style of me. The style of Talia and what the webcomic series will be going forward. Or maybe I changed something with a brush that I've used because it has just a little bit more texture to create my line art the way that I really want my line art to shine. See, that's what I'm getting at, is that any of this is about these rigid boxes that you can't break out of, but about ways for you to utilize the techniques and the things in your own head and the things that you see to augment how you can create further pieces, how you can get better at making your own art and having it come from the soul and people fall in love with it, not because it adheres to some standard thing that people think it should, but because they can tell that it's you and your soul in there, pulling them towards it. You realize that you can actually create things that you've just never created. You'll finish pieces that you literally never thought you could finish. Then you'll wonder to yourself why you ever tried to limit yourself to begin with. And the fun fact is, whether you started traditionally and came over to digital, or started digital and are transitioning to play with traditional, you can pull this knowledge between the two. You can play around with paints in Clip Studio Paint and then grab paints in real life and fiddle with them and mess around and figure out how to make things look the way you want them to in the real world. And you're allowed to do that. You're allowed for your pieces to completely change every time you pick up the pencil, the pen, or the brush. There is nothing that can stop you. This is what art is, about you simply creating what looks good and feels good for yourself. So at no point in time could another person tell you that you're not allowed to do something certain. If you want to have some cel-shaded characters that have some really bright and dithered highlights along with dithered shadows, but then some cel shading along with it, you're allowed. If you want your lines to be sketchy looking, you're allowed. Make them sketchy looking and then do cel shading. Or make them sketchy looking and then your color can be very painterly. Maybe you want to do oil paints with heavy emphasis on lines. You're allowed to do that. So do me a favor. This year, go out and create. Don't stop. Just make. Don't care about art style or anything else. Don't worry about finding it or chasing it. Look at and use techniques that speak to you, that will fill you with joy. You'll be glad you did. As always, thank you for watching. Like I said at the top, my new webcomic Talia is available to begin reading at artbytheprizewinningsquid.com and over on Global Comics. Just search for Talia. I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons over on Patreon, MB2000 Incorporated, and Lonnie W. Patrons get exclusive monthly art that includes workshop files, my custom-made brushes. They get to read further ahead in Talia. They get a ton of behind-the-scenes creation of the webcomic and more. You can sub for as little as $1 a month, and you will get a shout out on longer form videos like this one. Honestly, I hope that this year treats you right. I hope that you get to create a ton of wonderful pieces, and I hope I get to see a bunch of them, if you don't mind sharing. I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay moist, stay hydrated. I'm the prize-winning Squid, and I'm out of here. Squid salute. Take care.